A lot of the people who are heading into retirement have also been failed by the fiat system. They've worked their entire lives for a currency that has lost 90% of its value, going to go into a pension which has not been inflation adjusted. They've gone, look, I've done the right thing. I've paid for my mortgage. I've gone to uni, or I've done a trade. I've started a business. I got married. I had the kids. Now I'm in retirement age. I've got nothing left. It's not crazy to think that people are looking at alternatives because of how little value the Aussie dollar has left. And that's why Bitcoin has come to the forefront. And you don't have that buy, stack, and chill mentality, then you're going to really struggle to be in position long enough to get that upside that Bitcoin provides. Being exposed to the fiat currency system is far more risky than any kind of short-term price volatility that you might be exposed to. Let's understand that the United States is $37 trillion in debt. We have $2 trillion a year in deficit spending. That's set to double to $4 trillion US dollars a year in deficit spending. Where is all of that excess cash going to come from? They're going to print it. If that sounds like a Ponzi, it's because it is. 97% of the expansion of the monetary supply in Australia comes from debt creation, right? It's a debt
97%.
97%. You can fact check me on this. 97% of the actual broad money supply expands year over year through the expansion of credit. Trading is honestly, for the average Australian investor who's listening to this, or even any investor from anywhere on the planet, it's just not worth it, guys. For most people, they'll do far better coming in, disposing of their worthless Aussie dollars, buying Bitcoin, taking it to cold storage, and doing that every day, every week, every month. That's the best way to go about it.
Before we get into the podcast, ladies and gentlemen, Bish was just showing me his office, and I was like, let's just hit record and let's do this. So straight up, there's pure signal. Do you want to show everyone?
Absolutely. This is what we come into every day and what we report to, which is the Bitcoin white paper over here. That's what we always reference to. And my favorite line is the first part, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system, ladies and gentlemen. So that's what we go to. That's what we refer to all the time, because Bitcoin is more than just the price. It's a monetary asset and monetary network to be able to send and receive value. But yeah, one of the first things that we always look at when we come into the trading floor every day is the Bitcoin white paper.
I love that. Last time I saw your office was on Unemployable with Adam Hudson. It was like 10 or 10:30 at night when you were recording. It was like totally quiet. It was super dark, but it looks like it's pretty busy.
I'll show you, because at that time the brokers and the traders have gone home, but right now we got the full operations hammering away at the moment. Everybody's just on the floor doing their thing. So yeah, it's a little bit different during the day, during daylight hours. So yeah, pretty good stuff.
Dude, that's absolutely awesome. And what time are the brokers going home each day?
About 9 o'clock, 9:30. That's usually about the right time.
Okay. And what time are you starting?
7:30. It's long days on the trading floor, but we're very fortunate to be able to do what we do, because we want people to get direct access to who we are and what we do as a firm is to be able to help you buy and sell Bitcoin through a simple phone call or email. There's plenty of exchanges and platforms out there which can allow you to self-service, but I think that getting that personalized service, especially when you're putting in meaningful amounts of capital, is really important.
I really want to dive into the meaningful amounts of capital, especially when it comes to like self-managed super funds and stuff, because that's an easy way that a lot of Australians can move huge amounts of money straight into Bitcoin. But before we do all that, I've got a question, then we'll go into the intro. But thanks so much for showing us. Obviously, Bitcoin's trading 24/7, Bish. Like, when are people at the brokerage firm, like obviously there's public holidays and stuff that a lot of Australian residents want to take, Easter, Christmas, etc. So is it staffed all year round, or how's that work?
Yeah, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, we'll always have coverage on the desk. Our client portal allows you to also do, basic functions like trades, deposits, withdrawals. But if you want a brokerage experience from start to finish, where you just simply send funds and then have an email or a phone call with your broker and the trade is done for you, that's the brokerage hours at 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. But we do have a platform, and we don't mind showing people how to use the platform. But at the end of the day, why people coming to us is that they want a genuine handheld brokerage experience. But yeah, we're 7 days a week. We definitely give our staff time off. One of my staff is actually heading off to Japan next week, which is going to be awesome. He's going to spend some time in beautiful Okinawa down the south, and he's going to spend some time in Tokyo. So he's having a great time. So we definitely give the guys a break. They're not working 7 days a week, 365. But we've got a great office where we got plenty of coverage during hours, of course.
I love it. So it's like a full concierge service. But let's get into the intro. Ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't met Bish before, really a remarkable guy. Been in the Bitcoin space for a very long time. Bought Bitcoin in a Macca's car park. I so want to dive into that story, man. 100%. But you are running Australia's largest Bitcoin and crypto, if we want to throw that in there, brokerage firm, which is incredible. I guess, like, how does brokerage firm come about? And can you just tell the audience a little bit about yourself and your backstory?
Yeah, awesome. I mean, let's start with how I got into the space in the first place was back in 2016. I was already in foreign exchange. I was an FX broker before I transitioned into crypto brokerage. And I came across Bitcoin on the old FX forums where people were talking about volatile asset pairs or currency pairs to trade because I loved volatility. I was trading things like the Russian ruble, Hungarian fortnit, Mexican pesos, anything that had a bit of volatility in it, I love trading it. And so I got introduced to Bitcoin that way back in 2015. I dismissed it initially because I didn't understand it. I was a bit of a fiat maxi, if you will, at that time. I only understood fiat currencies just due to my foreign exchange background. I didn't really understand anything else. And then I was really grateful to kind of I kind of went down this rabbit hole with Bitcoin just in my own learning. And then I said, you know what, I'll bite the bullet. I'll buy some Bitcoin. So I bought about 10 grand worth of Bitcoin back in 2016 in a McDonald's car park, which was out on Middleborough Road, out in Blackburn South. That was how, because we did back then, it was almost all peer to peer. There wasn't really good exchanges or platforms back then to be able to utilize. Like there was obviously, you had the Binance, you had Coinbase, but I didn't really know how to engage with them. I felt a lot more comfortable being able to just get it right away. And I handed over an envelope, a wad of cash to this gentleman in a car park. And I got like a small, thin envelope and I had it on my little Honda Civic, 2008 Honda Civic in the passenger seat. And I was looking at it as I was driving home thinking, did I get ripped off? Because I had a little Bitcoin paper wallet. Got home, thankfully got it onto my own Bitcoin wallet, moved the funds across and bang, job was done. So really loved that. That was my introduction to Bitcoin back in the day. I fell in love with it more and more. I was spending less and less time looking at foreign exchange pairs, whilst I was keeping an eye on the macroeconomic picture and lens because it obviously affects Bitcoin's prices on a day-to-day basis. I just wasn't looking at FX trading anymore. I was just purely focused on Bitcoin investing, and then obviously did all the common shitcoiner mistakes. I tried to trade a stack of my Bitcoin trading alts, did well with it, lost a ton, made every single mistake you could ever imagine. I lost some Bitcoin, not checking the wallet address properly, and I copied what I thought was the full address, but I left off the last character. So I've done all the common mistakes that most people have made over, a 10-year crypto investing and Bitcoin investing journey. And then thankfully I got to a point where in 2022, I wanted to really start running my own firm. And that's when Stormrake came into fruition. It already existed as a business. In 2019, Doug Hemingway and Michael Milmeister started the firm as a prop trading desk where they were running their own private capital from 2019 until 2022. For anybody who doesn't know, there was really big statistical arbitrage trading opportunities back in the day. What arbitrage boils down to, plain and simple, there was a lot of what was known as the sushi premium and the kimchi premium back in 2017, 2018, which was where you could buy Bitcoin on American exchanges such as Coinbase for around what the market price was, and then sell it on Japanese or Korean exchanges for 20 to 30% higher because of the insatiable demand that there was onshore in Japan and Korea. And so
Just to jump in, is that what Sam Bankman-Fried was doing with FTX? Is that how he made his
Yeah,
money?
he had a bit of an arbitrage trading background, mainly at Jane Street, I think it was. It was another firm where they were doing arbitrage trading. So there was a few, it was a very well-known trade. It wasn't like a boutique thing. It wasn't like this niche thing. It was really easy. You buy Bitcoin on Coinbase and you sell it on a Japanese exchange and you collect 20% premium. Bang, that was it. It was a very simple trade, right? As long as you knew how to send and receive Bitcoin, you could easily pick up that. And as long as you had accounts on both exchanges, you could easily pick up that difference, right? So it wasn't like this ultra rare or ultra secret trading strategy. But the arbitrage opportunities got smaller and smaller and smaller as more and more institutions and more trading desks got involved. The arbitrage window got smaller, as well as the speed at which it would close would be a lot faster. So the guys at Stormrake, Doug and Mike, decided to open up a brokerage arm of the business because they had a lot of friends and family who were saying, can you trade for us, or can you buy Bitcoin for us? And we'll just chuck the money into your account. So they said, let's do it properly, start up a brokerage arm of the business. That's when I came into Stormrake back in 2022 to help lead the brokerage division. And there's been a whirlwind 3 years where we've just gone from the three of us as business partners to now over 30 employees in our new digs. It's been a wild journey, but we had started off with less than 100 clients in June of 2022, mainly friends and family of ours, to now over 6,000 clients across Australia and the globe.
If you've still got your Bitcoin on an exchange or you're looking to take your Bitcoin security to the next level, I've partnered with the Bitcoin Way. They offer live help for setting up cold storage, running your own node, keeping your Bitcoin private, planning for the future, using multi-sig, and so much more. They never touch your keys. They will not touch your coins. Instead, they'll show you how to buy and keep them safe. If you want to make your Bitcoin setup safer, you can book a free 30-minute call and have a chat with them. Safedine Amoose, the author of the Bitcoin Standard, Natalie Brunel, Preston Pish, and so many more recommend the professional IT cybersecurity team. Couple of outstanding things here. You can see they've been featured in Forbes, Bitcoin Magazine, Bitcoin Prague, Zero Hedge, Simply Bitcoin, the Bitcoin Safedine, the Bitcoin Standard podcast with Safedine Amoose, Bitcoin News, obviously G'day Bitcoin for a long time. They're the world experts in helping people become self-sovereign. It's not just about protecting your Bitcoin stash. Yes, they will help you do that in a very easy to understand step-by-step process. But from there, they can help you secure your data. They are your personal cybersecurity IT experts. And then step number 3 is getting a second passport, a Plan B residency. The team, very cheap, very affordable for people that are looking to take their sovereignty to the next level. You can find out more about their services. When you first log in to their website as well, they have got a free 3-minute quiz to allow you to check if you are doing your cybersecurity, your setup correctly. I urge everyone to jump onto the bitcoinway.com. I have put a link into the description for everyone. Could not recommend them enough. I've used them personally before I ever partnered with them for the channel, friends and family. They asked me to help them out. I'm like, go to the world experts. That is the Bitcoin Way. So reach out to the Bitcoin Way today. That's incredible. I sort of want to pivot just for a moment. Having 30 employees, your organization or the company is also based in Victoria, which is the highest taxed place in Australia. Australia already has some of the highest taxes in the world. What's that like operating a company? And the reason why I'm going down this route for the viewer is Bitcoin is getting more and more expensive. And to be able to earn more and more income, you need to be able to provide more and more value to the world. Bish is doing that, and even just with his employees, providing value to them, jobs, they're paying taxes, etc. They're spending money locally. But like, what's that pressure like, and all the regulation that's coming up, either specifically to Australia or Victoria?
A lot to unpack there, man. That's a fantastic question. So, what I liken it to, I played a lot of video games as a kid. Running a business in Victoria, in Melbourne, it's kind of like playing a video game on ultra hard mode, on extra hard difficulty, right? Because then that way, if I go anywhere else in the globe and I'm playing the video game on easy mode, it's going to be no problems, right? So I'm glad that I got to build the business and continue to build the business in Melbourne, Australia, because it is a very hostile environment towards entrepreneurs, towards business owners, towards especially even Bitcoin and cryptocurrency enthusiasts and digital asset firms. We are marginalized extensively. We're not appreciated by any of the TradFi services, which is understandable because we're coming to cut their lunch. The legislators and the regulators don't want to touch us. They don't have. We're treated as an unregulated asset class, which is beyond silly, to be honest with you, because we're a globally a $4 trillion asset class. Bitcoin itself is worth over $2.5 trillion. So there's no reason for it to be just ignored the way it's being ignored. But we are run by, how am I going to say this tastefully? Quite incompetent leadership is probably the best way I can put it. And they don't have any idea as to how to handle and treat this asset class. So because of that, as a consequence, because it's unregulated and because it's not treated with the respect that this asset class has earned through, being able to provide people an alternative to fiat currency, we're beholden to the banks. The banks are quite difficult to deal with us, and of course, we've got really high taxes here as well. So, in terms of giving you a backdrop, yes, there are a lot of challenges to be faced operationally, but we meet those challenges head on. The opportunity to take care of everyday Aussies is something that I personally take like great pride in. And look, yes, it's tough, but I'm not going to complain. I'm going to ask you to play me the world's smallest violin. We're doing quite well. You know what I mean? We've done quite well.
Yeah.
And so, yes, there are challenges, but the challenges is what gives us the opportunity to build Australia's leading brokerage firm and is what will allow us to really help on ramp. I think there's something like 2.5 million Aussies, about 10% of the Australian population has invested in Bitcoin or used Bitcoin in some capacity in their day to day.
Yeah.
I want to get the remaining, 24 million across the line and have them invest into Bitcoin. But how can we build a service that is like almost like a gateway, a reliable gateway to go from the fiat world to the Bitcoin world? There needs to be some sort of conversion mechanism because once you go to Bitcoin land, it's a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. At that stage, you don't need a broker anymore. You may need one to off ramp, but you don't need one to be in the ecosystem. When you're in the ecosystem, you can buy a cup of coffee, you can buy real estate, you can do whatever you want with just trading Bitcoin peer to peer. You don't need to go through any middleman. You don't need to go through any kind of trusted third parties or institutions. That's the whole point of Bitcoin, right? The Bitcoin ethos is that you don't need brokers. But as a bridge from TradFi to Bitcoin, we operate a brokerage firm to help you get into the ecosystem. Once you're there, do whatever you want. And if you want to off ramp, then you use us as well, ideally, if we've done a good enough job.
Yeah. And I think we'll dive into that side soon, but just to focus in on Bitcoin being unregulated here in Australia,
Sure.
I find that so peculiar because the ATO always have their hand out when it comes tax time. So they see it as an asset in that regard, but they're just not willing to put any regulation around it. I just want to shout out to Bayani from ABIB in Australia. He's doing some fantastic work to try and drive that regulation. But sticking on the point of Australia being quite hostile to Bitcoin, I want to talk about you've been debanked yourself. Obviously, you're dealing with thousands of clients. So I really want to get nuanced into the debanking situation when it comes to people exiting that system that's not serving the people. It serves the few. But what would you like to see in regards to regulation in Australia for Bitcoin in a perfect world scenario?
Well, I mean, just clarity really was all that our industry has been asking for. Just clarity, right? Don't treat us like a pariah. Don't treat us like we're this strange leper that you can't really touch or associate with. Just tell us what the state of play is, what the rules are, and we're happy to oblige, right? I think that as long as the individual's right to financial privacy is maintained and the individual's right to being able to keep their transactions discreet and anonymous to themselves, and what they decide to report or declare is up to them. I'll be happy to oblige with any kind of rules and regulations that are brought out. I mean, what's a great framework to look at is, say, America, right? America has its own problems. I'm not saying that they're a perfect country or a perfectly ran country either, but the approach towards digital assets, the approach towards Bitcoin has been incredibly welcoming, has been incredibly, forthright, and there's a lot of clarity now as to how to actually engage as a digital asset firm, and that allows more jobs, more growth, more adoption, and I think that's an overall a very good thing. So yeah, I just think that from my perspective, all I'm asking for, and I've written to legislators, I've written to senators, and said, tell us how you want us to engage and how do you want us to deliver our service to the Australian public. And you know what I get? Absolute crickets. I get nothing, absolutely nothing. So for me, I don't want anything other than just clarity. I'm not saying that we need to have a specific set of legislation. Ideally, the legislation should protect the individual's right to financial privacy and financial discretion. But outside of that, how we operate as a firm, we've got airtight processes and policies that we follow ourselves in order to deliver our service. And it's just important that all I'm asking for is clarity. How do you want me to, come to the table?
I love that. So I guess for the audience, and you and I were talking on the phone the other day. I think it ended up being close to 2 hours or thereabouts. But my mission with this channel is to allow people to give themselves permission to buy, stack, and chill. Buy, obviously, get Bitcoin. Stack is put that Bitcoin in self custody, and then the chill component is to continue to study Bitcoin, to read the books, and then to be able to go out and just realize, like, you've bought Bitcoin, you've stacked Bitcoin, it's in self custody. I can relax about the Bitcoin. Now I've got the mental clarity, the time to be able to focus on something, to be able to provide more value so that you can go back and repeat that. Running a brokerage firm, running 30 employees, living in the highest tax state here in Australia, all of those things come with costs. And of course, you want to make a profit at the end of the day for your effort. So, how are you guys making money as a brokerage firm?
Yeah, so we charge a flat fee transaction. 2% is what we charge, and that's it. If clients choose to hold assets with us, we do charge a 1% per annum custody fee, but that obviously doesn't apply in the stack component of what you're saying, which is we will do a test transfer to your self custody wallet. You confirm it's received, and then we'll send across the full balance. Happy days. And we process millions of dollars worth of withdrawals every day, no problem. So we get only 2% on the trade value. So depositing and withdrawing is free. It's just on the conversion where we get a little clip, and that's it. So if you buy $10,000 worth of Bitcoin from me today, Sean, it'll be $9,800 worth of Bitcoin to you. I get $200 of Pacific pesos, the worthless Aussie dollar, and then we stack that over the course of the month. At the end of the month, I pay my staff and my expenses and any other obligations I need to meet. And with that net profit, I go out and buy Bitcoin. So it's a really simple strategy. And that chill component, I really can get behind. When you say chill, I love that, because people need to find ways that they can produce value and give value to their fellow man and woman and actually deliver goods, services. Like some of my best clients, they're cattle farmers, right? They produce delicious
Nate, let's
Australian,
go.
homegrown, biodynamic, organic beef, right? And I buy from them these beautiful 20-kilo beef boxes. Here's the kicker. They came to me as a client, and now they accept two things: Aussie dollars and Bitcoin. For they're called
Yeah.
Muckleford Farm. They're out an hour and a half out of Melbourne, in a place near Castlemaine, just past Castlemaine Way, and they accept Bitcoin. Right? How cool is that? Right? They went in as
Legends.
uninitiated. They had no idea. They were running a hardworking farming couple who had about 60 heads of cattle, and they're just like, they're looking after themselves. They're about to enter into their retirement, and they're like, how can I get further ahead? They come across Bitcoin. They use me as an on ramp. They convert their worthless Aussie dollars into Bitcoin, and then they also accept Bitcoin now for Australian homegrown beef, which is awesome because I get to feed my family good nutritious food, and also got to pay for it in Bitcoin, which is great.
That's awesome. Hyper focusing on this client, but just like the demographics of this client, you said they're nearing retirement and they came across Bitcoin, and now they've gone into Bitcoin. Now they're accepting Bitcoin. They're getting rid of their worthless Aussie dollars. Bish, it's super easy for someone like me to be able to get Bitcoin to understand. It's not super easy. It takes time to understand Bitcoin, but like growing up with technology and things like that, and realizing that the money was broken, and just being born into the fiat system a little bit too late, it's a pretty easy shift, I think, for people that are younger and interested in freedom and technology. Someone that's working on the land, they're very grounded. And I'm stereotyping and stuff, but older generation as well. Statistically, um, that hasn't always been the case. These people are coming over. I guess the question is, number one, are you seeing more people around that generation closer to retirement coming into Bitcoin? And then number two, why, if that is the
Mate,
case?
absolutely. One of the fastest growing cohorts of Bitcoin investors in this country is over 55s within their self-managed super funds. Now, granted, self-managed super funds are mainly still equities. There's a lot of real estate in self-managed super funds, but a lot of people are starting to wake up to Bitcoin and coming to it themselves. They're not being evangelized to, they're not being preached to, they're not being converted. They're going, hang on, if I could, get exposure to this digital asset, whilst I don't understand it completely, they've already seen, and you can't discount this, they've seen the rise of the internet, in the early 2000s, and they've seen the rise of AI. So it's not like they're, call it ignorant to technology. They just maybe have seen it before and didn't take advantage of it. And now they're seeing Bitcoin as this really accessible way to get exposure to growth and to get exposure to technology. And that's how a lot of people have been approaching it. But you've got to keep in mind, a lot of the people who are heading into retirement have also been failed by the fiat system. They've worked their entire lives for a currency that has lost 90% of its value during their lifetime. They're going to go into a pension which has not been inflation adjusted, and they're really struggling to make ends meet. So they're looking for alternatives. And that's why Bitcoin has come to the forefront, not just because of the fact that it's got this number go up philosophy or I guess mentality that a lot of people have when it comes to approaching Bitcoin. But they've gone, look, I've done the right thing. I've paid for my mortgage. I've gone to uni, or I've done a trade. I've started a business. I got married. I had the kids. Now I'm in retirement age. I've got nothing left, close to nothing left, right? They might have 400K or 500K or $600,000 in a self-managed super fund. That's not going to last you retirement, guys. I mean, if you go down to old Woolies and get a loaf of bread and some milk, you're going to be spending $10, right? Like that's it. Like that's there's not a it's not crazy to think that people are looking at alternatives because of how little value the Aussie dollar has left. So people are looking for growth as a way to kind of make up for that shortfall.
That's interesting. Yesterday, I was in the IGA and picked up 6 liters of milk, and it cost me like $18 or something like that. I was like, "Wow, that's interesting. That's the price of milk." Usually, I don't pay attention to these things because obviously in Bitcoin, everything gets cheaper over time when you not denominate the world in Bitcoin, even if you aren't spending it. But it's really cool to be able to see old people doing that. Just before this call, I met with Simon from Udo Super Fun. We're partnering together to be able to give people options to be able to look into self-managed super funds. It's up on my website now, but it's really, I'm glad they're finding it and not just staying in that cash. Like $500,000 for someone young coming into the workforce, that sounds like a lot of money. But to be able to retire, if it's, $100,000 a year or something, and we're losing 11%, as they expand the M3 money supply year over year at about 11%, it's not really going to last long. However, what's that, like 3 Bitcoin
Yeah.
thereabouts in Australia, 2 and a bit? Over time, if they can get through, say, the next 5 years, then that probably is more than sufficient. Obviously, not financial advice, but it's definitely going to outweigh saving in fiat dollars. When you're talking to these people, or just anyone in general, it doesn't even need to be this cohort, are you talking about the cycles that we've had in the past? And obviously history doesn't always repeat, but it often rhymes. It's sort of like 3 years up or sideways and then 1 year down. And maybe the cycles will break, maybe they won't. Obviously there's the halving and things like that, and the monetary issuance cycle in relation to the elections. But are you giving them a bit of a heads up that you sort of need to zoom out a little bit, and it's appreciated about 55% on average year over year, but at like any day, at any time, for whatever reason, or for an extended period of time, it could be down?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a big conversation. We need to keep people educated and coming into Bitcoin eyes wide open, right? We don't want to be able to constantly get people piled into this asset class, not understanding the opportunity, but also not understanding the volatility that does come with Bitcoin investing. Because if you come in and you think, okay, well, numbers only going to continue to go up, and you don't understand that, and you don't have that buy, stack, and chill mentality, then you're going to really struggle to be in position long enough to get that upside that Bitcoin provides. So yes, we understand that any investment carries risks, but being exposed to the fiat currency system is far more risky than any kind of short-term price volatility that you might be exposed to with Bitcoin. Yes, volatility will come and go. Yes, there's cycles, if you will. I think that the cycles are more so less tied to the halving cycles now and more associated with the credit cycle. Credit cycle is a far more overarching and far more bigger catalyst, larger catalyst that's going to drive Bitcoin prices over the next 5 to 10 years than it will be the Bitcoin halving cycle. Yes, there'll be less supply coming through, but the expansion of the broad money supply, the expansion of credit, the fiat end game over the next 20, 30, 40 years, that's where the damage is going to really come from, right? And by I mean damage to the legacy system, which would be a boon to crypto and Bitcoin, because as they continue to print more and more currency, and let's understand that the United States is $37 trillion in debt, right? National debt. They have $2 trillion a year in deficit spending. That's set to double to 4 trillion US dollars a year in deficit spending. Where is all of that excess cash going to come from? They're going to print it, usually through the issuance of government bonds, in which then the Federal Reserve goes out and buys by printing currency to then buy the government bonds. That if that sounds like a Ponzi, it's because it is, right? So that's how most credit creation is created at the federal level or at the government level. And then what you have on top of that is you've got the banks. The banks are not, the commercial banks cannot be forgiven in this instance because they're a big part of the currency dilution and debasement. So if I deposit $100,000 into any of the big four banks, or any bank in Australia for that matter, it doesn't matter which size they are. But if you deposit funds into there, you become what is known as an unsecured creditor, which means you get paid last in the case of an insolvency or a default by the bank. What they do is if you put $100,000 into your local bank branch, you think that that's your $100,000 that you can call upon. What they're doing is they're lending it out 10 times over through what is something known as fractional reserve banking. It's called rehypothecation. So what they then do is they lend out that $100,000 10 times over, and that's essentially ones and zeros that are created out of thin air, and they start earning interest on money that they never had or funds that they never had by being able to provide somebody essentially a line of credit. That's how most currency is created in this country. 97% of the expansion of the monetary supply in Australia comes from debt creation, right? It's a debt in
97%.
97%. You can fact check me on this. 97% of the actual uh, broad money supply expands year over year through the expansion of credit, right? So you deposit $100,000 into the bank, they lend it out $1,000,000. There's $900,000 that's just good and created out of thin air, and then you and I have to slave away like good little cattle to be able to produce income in order to pay the interest on funds that were never real in the first place. And then whatever you don't get taken from in terms of, on your interest repayments, you then get taken away from in taxation, and whatever's left over, inflation takes the rest. It's a very corrupt system, and that's why I advocate for Bitcoin.
Mate, that's absolutely insane. Like crazy insane. And people have the nerve, especially mainstream media here in Australia, to call Bitcoin a Ponzi scheme. That's
It's absolutely comical.
that's out of control. Talking about like why advocating for holding Bitcoin, coming from a trading background, what's your thoughts on trading Bitcoin?
Great question. I think I've done it. in the past. I'm here. I don't want any of the Bitcoiners listening to kind of come and exercise me or just have any issue with that. I have traded Bitcoin. I've traded Bitcoin with leverage. I've traded spot. I've traded margined Bitcoin as well, and then traded alts. Trading is honestly, for the average Australian investor who's listening to this, or even any investor from anywhere on the planet, it's just not worth it, guys. You end up underperforming Bitcoin by a considerable margin. There's a saying that we have on the trading floor: over trading leads to underperformance. Number one, you as a Bitcoin hodler get paid for holding, right? As your Bitcoin broker, I get paid for you transacting. So in that instance, would you want to overtrade, or would you want to buy, stack, and chill? Because I think trading in general is not something that I recommend for people. Because look, whilst you can trade, if you want to trade and you want to use Stormrake to buy and sell, I'm not going to turn down your business. Happy days, come and trade. I've got no problem with that, because that's how I get paid. I get paid on when you place a trade. But for most people, they'll do far better coming in, disposing of their worthless Aussie dollars, buying Bitcoin, taking it to cold storage, and doing that every day, every week, every month, on whatever interval they feel comfortable with. That's the best way to go about it, because you'll get the best of the compound average annual growth rate that we were just talking about, without having to overpay in transaction fees and having to stress about being in position, or being. The way I liken it is that if you're waking up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat worrying about your trade, you've over leveraged or you're over invested, and it's not in a good place to be. Whereas if you got Bitcoin in cold storage chilling, you can go out, produce an income, spend time with your wife and kids or your family or whatever it is. You can do things that are actually meaningful and enjoyable for yourself as a person, and you can be contributing to society in a more meaningful way than trading ones and zeros on an order book on an exchange or with your broker, right? I think trading is a great way to make a living if you want to treat it as a profession. If you want to be a professional trader and you want to go out and you want to spend all your time on it, spend 4 or 5 years getting the tuition that you need in the market, expend hundreds of thousands of dollars in lost income, then go for it. But if you want to be able to just maximize the benefit of Bitcoin without having to take on all the stress and the risk that comes associated with trading, just be an investor. Investing is for everyone. Everyone. My son should be investing. He's 5 years old. My daughter should be investing. She's 2 years old. My grandmother should be investing. She's 80 years old. Everybody should be an investor, but not everybody should be a trader.
I am so grateful and freaking amazed with what you just said. Like that's exactly my message when it comes to trading. Is people should not be doing it. It is a profession. I said, like, if you want to do that, like, realize that it's a 4-year tuition fee and you're going to pay to be able to play. Because people get so distracted, and especially like when altcoins start pumping and stuff, and then all the influencers and the moon boys come in, they'll start drawing lines on charts, and then people are like, oh yeah, I can just do what they're doing. But you've come from a professional trading background, and you have traded Bitcoin in the past, and you're like, buy Bitcoin, get into self-custody. And talking about that for my audience, so it's literally buy, stack, and chill. The stack's the most important part. To me, if your Bitcoin's not in self-custody, it's not yours. Bish earlier said something that if you leave it on the brokerage firm, it's 1% a year. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I've got strong opposition for paying any fee on your stack for that. To get into self-custody is all that matters. I like Bish as a person, but still, just take it into self-custody. Learn how to do that, and you're not paying 1% of your stack. And as your stack goes up, if you're to measure that in fiat dollars, that could end up being a lot. And you don't need to do it. Like, it's super not hard. Bish, I believe you work and recommend people to the Bitcoin way as much as I do as well. So like there's heaps of ways you can do it, or people can watch BTC sessions on YouTube. You can figure it out. But if you have large stacks, and I think I want to drill down into this specifically, people that are using a brokerage firm are probably moving more amounts of fiat and into Bitcoin. Number one, I may get my numbers wrong, and feel free to correct me, but it's like a minimum deposit of about $2,000.
Correct, sir.
Cool. So if you're just DCAing like week in, week out, Amber, Izzy, the team, absolutely amazing. You can just automate it, $50, $100 a week. And I think people should be doing that. I've been DCAing for nearly the last 6 years, about 5.5 years now. But when it comes to large stacks, move it across. But Bitcoin, yes, it will have its down days and stuff, but over time it can go parabolic. And I want to sort of talk about price this cycle, next cycle. That little 1% fee, not to steal your business or whatever, I'm just against it when people have that option to be able to do it. So I just wanted to say that from my
Just
perspective.
to add,
Get
yeah,
into self custody and then it's happy
just to
days.
add on to that as well, the 1% per annum fees, that's a risk cost to us as well. That's why there's a 1% fee to be paid for. It's not just us collecting funds for jam or money for jam.
Of
The reason why we
course.
do it is that each of our clients' assets is our liability. We need to keep client assets safe and secure. We're holding $500 million worth of Bitcoin in cold storage, right? So it's serious stuff here, right? That 1% per annum,
Yeah.
that's like our tiny little bit of risk premium in order to keep the wider asset base safe, because we put our clients' assets into our own cold storage vaults, but we need to make sure that people, when they choose to withdraw, it's not a problem for us. We process millions of dollars worth of withdrawals daily. Reason why I feel comfortable with that is that
Yeah.
people are taking their assets off my books and taking it into their own self custody. Happy days. That means that I've got less liabilities to worry about. So that 1% per annum, the reason why we do charge for it is that it's a risk cost to the business to keep client assets safe and secure. I would never trust an institution or a firm that charges nothing for custody, because you don't know what they're doing with your balance whilst it's there, right? And if they are going to go down the self custody route, then that doesn't really matter one way or the other. But anybody who offers free
Yeah.
custody, you got to be concerned about what they're doing with your Bitcoin, because you can't actually see it. It's very opaque until you take it into self custody and ideally run your own Bitcoin node, which is incredibly important to do as well. We've got three here in the office. We've got
Very.
three here in the office, and I've got two at home myself. But really important to go ahead and do that. But if you're going to go down the route of self custody, which is excellent, I have no problems with that, because you take liabilities off my book and you hold your own assets. So happy
Yeah.
days.
Yeah, love it, and maybe to be able to drill down a little bit more for anyone that's watched the channel, they know that I'm opposed to it. From a business point of view, I understand that you're taking on the risk, and it makes sense from the
Mm.
business, 100%. But with Bitcoin, we don't need to expose ourselves to that anymore, and that's what really, and maybe like a bit of my backstory sort of came from nothing. I've been homeless and had some like really dark periods of my time where I've absolutely owned nothing and I wasn't happy,
Mm.
and still had bills and stuff coming out. But now with this revolution of Bitcoin, we can do it. We can put it in self custody, and it's like really it's the only thing that we can actually own. And that's all I'm here to be able to advocate for people is their freedom. Yes, like you've got that service and stuff, but I am advocating for people anywhere they buy Bitcoin, whether it's through Bish, the Ambrap, anywhere in the world, put it in self custody. Like that's my mission and my message,
I'm
Bish.
with you 100%. I mean, Bitcoin in my custody is of no benefit to everyone, and that's why I'm also quite fundamentally opposed to Bitcoin ETFs as well, right? I mean, whilst they've been
Yeah,
a boon for institutional adoption and for asset price increases, I think that Bitcoin is only going to succeed as an asset class if we can actually have that means of exchange qualities and that store of value properties really come to the forefront. If we're only ever going to trust custodians to hold our Bitcoin, whether it be with brokers, exchanges, ETF, with ETFs, it's not real Bitcoin, guys, right? Until you can actually withdraw that
amen.
Bitcoin and independently verify that Bitcoin for yourself, we're only halfway there. So, but this is to be expected whilst we're very early. We're in that early adoption phase. There's still going to be a lot of intermediaries in this asset class until we get to full hyper Bitcoinization, where everybody's running a home node, a node at home, and they've got their own Bitcoin self custody set up. That's where the future is.
Yeah, amen, brother. So talking about Bitcoin, just taking over the world. That's my thoughts. I think it's just a matter of time. I think it's inevitable. But what role do you reckon Bitcoin plays in the future of assets and just global money? And how's its adoption keep increasing? Because it's already a pretty large asset.
Yeah, I think that Bitcoin eventually will be the world's settlement layer. I believe Bitcoin will be the primary means of exchange. That is, whether it be Bitcoin Lightning settling coffee transactions or Bitcoin base chain settling, balance of trades between massive nation states. Bitcoin is going to be the world's settlement layer, right? And Bitcoin will only succeed if it's a peer-to-peer electronic cash network. Remember, that's the first line of Satoshi Nakamoto's white paper. And the peer-to-peer part isn't just myself, Bisher, to you, Sean. It could be Stormrake the business to your business, because we could be exchanging goods and services, or it could be the nation state of Australia trading with China, that's peer-to-peer. Rather than having to sell Aussie dollars or sell Chinese yuan to buy Aussie dollars to then buy iron ore to then ship out the iron ore, it's bang, instant settlement on Bitcoin, the most trusted and independent monetary network on the planet. And that allows everybody from the individuals like ourselves right up to the nation state level to trade independently without having to trust each other or trust each other's currency. And that's the reason why Bitcoin is a trustless system. One of the largest markets on the planet, which fuels a lot of global trade, is known as the euro dollar market. It is not the euro USD cross rate. That's different. If you're trading euro against US dollars, that's EUR/USD. It's one worthless fiat currency crossed against the other. It doesn't really matter. But the euro dollar market is any trade that's done in US dollars between two nations outside of the US. So, for example, imagine you are a European textile manufacturer and you want to, get some Bangladeshi fabrics, right? And you're going to do this import-export portion of your trade to kind of get the fabrics where you want it from, or you might be exporting it from Italy, these beautiful Italian fabrics, and wanting to get manufactured in Bangladesh. You're not going to trust each other's currency, right? So what you do is you end up trading in US dollars, which is the default global reserve currency. And so I see Bitcoin replacing the euro dollar market. I see Bitcoin becoming the main store of value and the main means of exchange to settle these types of transactions. So that way, a Bangladeshi textile manufacturer can be able to receive products from anywhere in Europe and then settle that transaction in Bitcoin. Job's done, right? And I think that's the future of Bitcoin, is the ultimate store of value and the ultimate means of exchange, which is going to power global trade right down to your small cup of coffee purchased in the morning.
How long before we get there do you think, speculate?
I would say that within our lifetimes, probably by the time my son is entering into, the workforce and is of age, he's 5 now. So by the time he's like 18, 19, 20, 21, so give it 15 to 20 years, I think we'll definitely be at that stage, and he'll be raising and closing invoices in Bitcoin. He won't even have to be worrying about Aussie dollars and euros and US dollars.
Yeah, I guess the joy is like on a micro level, we can already do this now. I put a post out on X and said, hey, I need somebody to edit a podcast so I can get one ahead. And no idea where in the world they are. They're like, yeah, I can do it. I sent them the folder, said, send us your Bitcoin address. Bang. Like, no idea where they
That's
are.
awesome.
Don't even know what their first name is.
That's awesome.
Dude, it's incredible.
That's amazing.
Absolutely amazing. So that's, say, 13 to 15 years. The other day we were talking about prices this cycle, because I think a lot of the Bitcoin community, especially new people, are starting to get a little bit misled. People are jumping on the bandwagon, 440K in play or $1 million this cycle. I 100% believe those numbers are coming, but I don't believe they're happening this year or next year. I've got my own numbers, but I guess where do you think a fair value for Bitcoin to go to, and then like end up and chopsolidate around over the next couple of years before continuing?
My big number,
or do you maybe see it differently?
No. My big number for this cycle, I've been calling for Bitcoin to $200,000 US. I've been calling for that one for a while, so I've given myself a bit of a buffer, 20%, so 10% either way, so between 180,000 on the lower end and 220 on the higher end. Sounds about right. If we were then to chop solidate, it's probably around where we are now. So if we do go and hit those lofty highs of 180, 200, even 220, we might even pull back and see and revisit the 100 to 110k pocket again, and then mellow out there for a little while before we run up again. But that's kind of my range at the moment. We will see 180 to 200 sometime in the next 6 to 12 months, and I think people will underestimate how quickly we're going to get there because we've been in this really steady chop and grind to the upside for the last 2 years. We started at 40 odd K, 40 odd thousand US at the start of 2024. We're now trading at 112,000 in halfway through 2025, or a little over 2025. So it's been an incredible run, but it's just been very steady up and to the right with periods of volatility and corrections. I anticipate that we'll see something quite similar for the next 6 to 12 months, where we'll steadily grind to 140, 150, and then bang, we'll get a massive shoot up, a teleportation move, 180 to 220. Will leave a lot of people sidelined. There'll be a lot of people jumping in at that local top at that time. There'll be just complete euphoria at that time. You're going to have to come in. I'm going to have to rewatch this video to kind of remind myself to stay calm. And that'll be between 180 to 220, and then we'll consolidate somewhere above 100K, because a lot of people thought that Bitcoin was going to go below 10K at the last cycle in terms of its correction, where they were like, "Oh, I'll buy Bitcoin below 10,000" when we had the whole, FTX, Celsius, Luna debacle in 2022. People were calling for sub 10,000. I'm sure there'll be a lot of concern when we revisit the current price levels, which we're trading at now, which is 110 to 112. People will be calling, "Oh, I'll buy Bitcoin below 100,000. I'll get in at that stage." You're not going to see it, right? Chances are you're not going to see it, right? No one knows what the future will be. But if we run that hard and we have a correction, 50% correction, and come down to that, 100K pocket or 105, 110 pocket, I know that we spent a lot of time chopping in and around the $100,000 level, or testing it multiple times before we broke through it. That just shows me a strong level of psychological support in the future, because it provided a lot of psychological resistance at that time. And I think that that's a line in the sand that we probably won't get back below for quite some time now.
I tend to agree. I've been saying 120 to 150 since probably early to mid last year. And not to say that it can't go above 150 this cycle. I just think it's where it's going to end up, is somewhere between like 120 to 150. Obviously, we hit 120 and already, so like that hit. Anything lower is a bonus, anything higher is a bonus, and then it's just buy, stack, and chill once you get into that mentality. But the reason I asked you, Bish, is Bitcoin's a long game, and it's not just something that you can get in. And even from a trading background, what you said earlier, like I love so much, is don't trade this. Just buy a stack and then chill, and then just forget about it and go do something else. Provide a service for someone, or as Oliver Valise would say, who is like another big trader, and he had a Bitcoin channel, and he's sort of gone a little bit quiet now. It's like, trade, but trade everything else for Bitcoin, and he would teach people to be able to trade and things like that. I'm not interested in it. It's not something that I want anything to do with. I've got better things to do personally for the next 4 years, and I know that's how long that education is going to take. But for people that were interested, it's like, don't trade Bitcoin. Like just chill, trade everything else for Bitcoin. We've got a couple of minutes left. You've had some issues in Australia personally being debanked, but obviously you've got thousands. How many clients do you have? It's thousands of clients.
6,000 now. Yeah.
Okay. So 6,000 clients going from fiat into Bitcoin.
Correct.
A few of those are going to have issues with the banks. You've had issues with the banks. Like, I guess, number one, what happened to you? And I know a little bit of the story, but I think the audience would find it interesting. And then when people are exiting that fiat matrix, slave system, whatever you want to call it, just that worthless toilet paper, what issues are some of those people having? And then how's that being resolved with you guys or with them and their bank?
Yeah, it's a great question. So in April of this year, I went to Phuket And by the way, I love Southeast Asia. Full disclosure, I went with my wife and my kids. We're going back there next year. We're going to spend about a month in Thailand, Vietnam, and Malaysia. Because part of what I've always wanted to do as a Bitcoiner is use my Bitcoin to be able to go and travel the world, right? And the kids are still young at the moment. My son is 5 and my daughter's 2. So the idea is we'll keep it in around Asia because it's easy enough to get to. Because anybody who's listening to this that has traveled with kids knows what I'm talking about. So so that'll do me. 9 hours is more than enough. So yeah, we got there and we had a great time. And we were spending, I always only have a couple of $1,000s on in my commercial bank account at any one time because I just don't trust the banks. But I was going to use that as spending money whilst I was overseas, going to convert some Aussie dollars to some Thai baht and be on my way. Within 2 days of landing into Phuket, I got a letter, an email from, I won't name the institution, but it was one of the big four banks who sent me an email saying, you have effectively been terminated as a client of the bank and we don't have anything to do with you. So I was like, okay, sure. So I let the kids and the
I could guess the bank, I'm
yeah,
sure.
I let the kids and the missus go into the pool, have a swim around in the resort, and I got onto the phone to the bank. I said, "Look, I'm happy for you to kick me off as a customer. I'm not a big fan of you anyway, but I'm in Thailand. I'm in Phuket at the moment. Do you mind just leaving the account open so that I can sort it out upon my return? I plan on returning on these dates. These are the dates that I left. I can send you the itinerary so you know where I'm at, just to be, full disclosure, right?" And they go, "No, we don't want to have anything effective immediately. Your account is closed. You can't use your account." I said, no problems, happy to do that. So I let them hold on to it. We withdrew the cash upon when we came back to Melbourne. But how I got through the whole situation is I always have Bitcoin on a hot wallet. Always. It's like my emergency Bitcoin stash, right? Because I'm not going to travel around with my cold cold storage private keys lying around. I'm not going to go through that. It's a very silly thing to do. But what I do is I always have about like 15 to 20 grand in a Bitcoin hot wallet as like an emergency fund, right? I converted zero point zero 0.03 of a Bitcoin in a little shop in Bangalore Road in the heart of Patong in Phuket. I converted zero point zero 0.03 of a Bitcoin for 90,000 Thai baht, and the whole family holiday was funded on 0.03 of a Bitcoin. And the family didn't even realize, didn't even miss a beat, right? We still went out, we had a great
Wow.
time. We ate pad krapao and pad thai, and we just went on these beautiful island trips. It was amazing, right? But the whole way through was funded thanks to Bitcoin, and I was able to bang instantly convert it. And there's actually a lot of places in Phuket and in Southeast Asia that accept Bitcoin directly as well. Even just little street vendors and stuff like that. Now, majority of the transactions are still Thai baht. It's still a cash economy in a lot of Southeast Asia, but I'm seeing an increasing trend of Bitcoin being accepted as payments, particularly in places which have already had rampant hyperinflation. And I love that about that pocket of the world. But yeah, that's how I got through it all. Thanks to Bitcoin, we could have turned an otherwise a really sour experience. Because imagine if I was a fiat guy and I had no other alternative than commercial banks. I would have had to go through Western Union, or I would have had to ask my family to send me funds. It would have been an absolute disaster, right? Whereas with Bitcoin, it just
Mm.
works perfectly. It's globally recognized. And here's the kicker. Here's the kicker. I was able to convert my Bitcoin into Thai baht at a lower spread than what I would convert my Aussie dollars into Thai baht, right? So imagine this. Imagine you're a institution. You've got Aussie dollars in your hand and you're paying 5% to convert your Aussie dollars to Thai baht. Whereas if you do it in Bitcoin, you're paying 2% or less, right? That's amazing. So
Wow.
you're getting more bang for your buck, and you're doing it without having to ask for permission, and you're doing it outside the banks, and on top of that getting physical cash. I mean, it's just like Bitcoin is the apex predator of all financial assets because there is not another asset on the planet that can do what I just described.
That's incredible. And what about for people moving from their banks into the brokerage firm
Yeah,
account?
yeah.
Obviously, they're going to have issues as well.
Not guaranteed to have issues. So
No, of
out of every
course.
10 transfers that I out of every 10 transfers that I receive, two or three of my clients will give me a call and say, "Bish, the banks are giving me a hard time." I say, "Look, don't stress. The number one thing is don't misrepresent what you're doing it for." I'll tell you a funny story. I had one of my clients send me $500,000, and the bank stopped the transaction from going through. They didn't reject it. They just gave him a call and said, "What's the purpose of this transfer?" He goes, initially he said it was none of your business, which is fair enough. I understand the sentiment. And they said, "No, we need to know in order to complete the transaction." He goes, "Oh, I'm buying a pistachio farm," right? So they look up Stormrake, got nothing to do with pistachios whatsoever, and they froze the account and they kicked the funds back, right? So I said to him, "Dude, you don't need to do that. Just we're an Austrac registered digital currency exchange. You don't need to misrepresent who we are or what you're doing. You're not doing anything illegal or immoral. You're simply converting your Aussie dollars into Bitcoin and you're making an investment. Just like whether you're buying real estate or shares, you're free to make these investments as you see fit." And that's what it comes down to. And so, yeah, most of the time it works through no problems. But, for example, the last 3 days, we've processed over $10 million worth of deposits and trades on behalf of our clients. So whilst there might have been, say, a cohort that of 500K that found it difficult to come across, the other 9.5 million came through without a hitch.
Nice, love it. That's sort of top of the hour, Bish. For everyone watching, on g'daybitcoin.com, you will find a link to Stormrake as well. In the description, I'll put Bisher's X account. You can connect with him there. But just a final message or a send over, I just want to hand the floor over to you. I think your messaging around Bitcoin is pretty pertinent and worth taking on board for the average punter just looking for something better, man. Like, there is a better option, and that is Bitcoin. But final last words
is, guys, I want you to enjoy being a Bitcoiner. I want you to enjoy this asset class. Learn how to use Bitcoin in your everyday life. Learn how to use Bitcoin as self-custody. Learn how to on-ramp and off-ramp efficiently, right? Learn how to be able to use Bitcoin overseas. Travel with Bitcoin. Use Bitcoin. It's not just about being able to just have a stack of Bitcoin and then look at it and then hope that the number is going to go up year after year. It will do that. Just stay calm. That's what's going to happen. But learn how to integrate Bitcoin into everyday life. If you run your own business, you might be a Sparky or a plumber, or you might run a cafe. Learn how to integrate Bitcoin and accept Bitcoin for payments. Make your life easier instead of having to always constantly convert your fiat dollars into Bitcoin and pay a broker or an exchange a commission in order to do so. I'm talking you guys out a bit of business for doing business with me, but learn how to accept Bitcoin in order to be able to grow your Bitcoin stack. It's really not that hard. So my number one message to people is, please learn how to use Bitcoin, not just from a self-custody perspective, not just to be able to have a nice big pile in cold storage, but learn how to use it in your everyday life and become a true Bitcoiner, independent from the banks.
I love that. For everyone out there, if you haven't already, hit subscribe. If we vibe, please do something nice for yourself today, for somebody else. Be blessed. Peace.